Anti-terrorism prosecutors are investigating, but there were no explosives found on the man. Sharon Thomas has the latest.
Dozens of armed police surround the Louvre, trying to bring calm where there was chaos. It was just before 10 a.m. when the attacker struck right at the heart of one of Paris's busiest tourist attractions. Police say a lone man armed with a machete and shouting "God is great" in Arabic launched himself at soldiers and police officers guarding the museum. A second machete was found on him. One of the soldiers shot the attacker 5 times, gravely wounding him. A second soldier was injured.
Voilà, donc ce matin vers 10h, nous avons...
There was a man on the escalator towards the commercial zone of the Louvre who carried a machete and perhaps a second weapon. He threw himself against a team of military officers who were patrolling the area. Hundreds of tourists were inside the museum at the time. Some were taken into special safe rooms. As the roadblocks were cleared, they began streaming out. Security has been beefed up considerably here, following a wave of attacks across France, which has left more than 200 people dead over the past 2 years. Little is known so far about the main suspect in this latest attack, simply that police believe he's in his mid-30s and without identity papers. Sharon Thomas, ITV News.
Theresa May is in Malta for a meeting with EU leaders as she performs the tricky task of building alliances ahead of Brexit, while also delivering a message from President Trump. The Prime Minister is calling for all NATO members to meet their 2% defence spending target to ensure the support of the USA. Let's go live to the Maltese capital, Valletta, where our Europe editor James Mates is this afternoon. Good afternoon to you. Listen, many EU leaders have expressed deep scepticism, haven't they, about Donald Trump's administration. So how has Mrs May's message been received there?
Well, it's interesting. This summer was supposed to be about migration in the future, but the black cloud on the horizon for many of the leaders here is the new administration in Washington. This is their first meeting since he took over at the Oval Office. Some of the comments on the way in this morning, President Hollande of France saying he's putting unacceptable pressure on Europe with his comments about Brexit and about wanting to see the EU breaking up. Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker, he said that the new administration in Washington does not know Europe. And there were lots of other remarks on that along the same lines. Now, Theresa May, of course, she's the only one who's actually met him, but there's great suspicion about her relationship with him. They do recognise that she did good work on swinging him back behind NATO, and she's added to that by saying, look, we must all pay our 2% of GDP on defence spending if we're to keep them on board. But there are also warnings for Theresa May that at some point, if the Trump administration carries on the way it is, the UK is going to basically have to choose between very close relationships with Washington or, post-Brexit, a close relationship with the EU. It's that stark.
Yeah, and there were also talks today about refugees and migration, which, of course, can't have been easy with the issue of Brexit playing such a big part in any discussion involving the UK.
No, well, we're only 200 miles from the coast of Libya here in Malta. This is right on that route of refugees are using far more now than coming from Turkey into Greece. That was talked about this morning. Mrs May said she would support a big offer, as she called it, being made to the Libyans along the same lines, though not necessarily the same offer, as was made to Turkey. And to that end, she is also prepared to put forward another 600,000 euros of British money towards helping train the Libyan Coast Guard. This afternoon, they will be talking about life after Brexit, and of course, she won't be here for that.
James, thank you. Well, here, a second legal challenge to the Brexit process has failed in the High Court this morning. Let's go to our political correspondent, Paul Brand, who is at the High Court. So relief for the government, presumably, but what was behind the case in the first place?
Yeah, Ranveer, essentially exactly the same principle as last week's case in the Supreme Court, namely whether MPs should get the final say over Brexit rather than the Prime Minister. But whereas last week's case was about triggering Article 50, leaving the EU as a whole, this was about triggering something called Article 127, which is pretty much as technical as it sounds, effectively about leaving the free trade area, having a separate vote on leaving the European Economic Area or single market. Now, this time, the judges have decided that no, MPs don't need a vote. The government says it is very glad about that, but those who brought the case say that isn't quite the end of the matter.
What the court said is that the government has yet not made a decision to pull out of the single market. So what the judge is saying is that we were too early. So we are encouraged. We are effectively going to continue the campaign to make sure that Parliament has the vote on whether we pull out of the economic area and then the single market.
Well, this afternoon the judges will give their exact reasons for making their decision, which could be important not just for this case but for others like it, as people eye this up and decide whether they too could bring a grievance to the court. Because while the government has won this particular legal battle, I don't suppose it will be the last that's fought over Brexit.
Paul Brand, thank you. Supermarkets across the UK have begun rationing lettuce because of a shortage. Customers are being met with empty shelves, smaller produce and higher prices. It's the latest vegetable to be affected after courgettes ran low last month. The problems have arisen because bad weather hit crops in Spain and Italy last year. Farmers say stocks won't be back to normal for months. Suzanne Verdi reports.
Bare shelves across many major supermarkets as they're hit by the lettuce shortage. The problem's been caused by an extreme mix of drought, followed by flooding and freezing conditions, wrecking crops in southern Spain. Shoppers this afternoon, though, seemed mainly unfazed by the lack of lettuces.
Don't have it, so I don't buy it.
Didn't surprise me, the weather's been really bad. And, it means the prices are going to go up.
I don't use a lot of lettuce anyway, so it won't affect me.
The shortage has led some supermarkets to ration supplies. Tesco is currently limiting customers to 3 iceberg lettuces each, Morrison's to 2, and Sainsbury's, although it says it has been affected by the current situation, says it's working to maintain supplies to customers. Budget supermarkets Aldi and Lidl say they're not affected. The shortage is unprecedented.
It is serious when it comes to households who perhaps can't get hold of the salad leaves that they would like to, or other fresh produce items, peppers and so on, or tomatoes are also affected.
Experts warn if the weather doesn't improve in the coming weeks, the problem may continue until the spring, with many vegetables and salads rising in price. Suzanne Verdi, ITV News.
And there are more details about the different vegetables affected by the farming problems in southern Europe on our website. That's itv.com/news. Still to come, following his father, how Chris Eubank Jr. aims to emulate his dad by taking on his own world title. And rebuilding a bridge over troubled water as work to reunite a town split in two by floods is finally complete. But first, cancer cases in women are expected to rise 6 times faster than in men over the next 20 years. New research from Cancer Research UK predicts that by 2035, 9.3 million people will be diagnosed with cancer. Rates will climb by around 0.5% for men, but by 3% for women. Breast cancer cases, the most common form of the disease in the UK, are expected to increase from nearly 55,000 a year to over 71,000. Researchers say lifestyle is partly to blame. Debbie Vince was diagnosed with cancer of the womb 5 years ago.
With my cancer, the numbers are rising year on year, and I think that probably is due to the fact that women are, in general, heavier than they used to be. My cancer does have a direct link with excess fat.
Well, Fiona Osborne is here from Cancer Research UK. So what is behind this rapid increase, and why particularly for women than men?
Well, as you mentioned, lifestyles are likely to be playing a very large part of the increase that we're predicting into 2035. It could be that the difference between men and women might be due to sort of historical factors like smoking. So women took up smoking a lot later than men, so that could be what we're seeing reflected in these numbers. But it's also likely that obesity and being overweight is likely linked to these numbers as well. So obesity is linked to 13 different types of cancer, but several of those are cancers which only or vastly affect women. So things like breast cancer, womb cancer and ovarian cancer cancer, and that might be why we're seeing this splitting between men and women and the rates that we see for those two groups.
Well, the numbers are pretty startling. I mean, can anything be done to reverse the trend, or are we now in a situation where essentially it's the next generation who are going to have to think about it, and there is a particular generation who are now, their fate is sealed?
Well, there's never sort of a point of no return, and with lifestyles, any small changes that people make, so things like giving up smoking, cutting back on the amount of alcohol they drink, taking up a bit more physical activity, eating a healthy, balanced diet.
Over how long would you have to do that to reverse the trend of, if you've been overweight for 30 years, you then try to manage your weight all of a sudden? I mean, is the damage already done, essentially?
It's not. So for things, especially like physical activity, we know we've got very good evidence that at any point taking that up will help reduce the risk of cancer. So it's not that anyone's fate is sealed, and there's things we can all do in our everyday lives to help reduce the risk.
Obesity is such a problem. I mean, are we medically equipped in this country with the right sort of treatment and the cost of it all to deal with all these, millions of extra people who will have cancer?
Well, that's really what these numbers are helping us try and plan and predict for, that we're seeing this rising burden of cancer, and obviously obesity is linked not just to cancer but other diseases as well.
I mean, survival rates have been really good, haven't they, in lots of different cancers, but one worries that if there are more and more people needing treatment, that survival rates will go down.
Well, survival has been increasing, so we're now at the point where half of people diagnosed with their cancers survive, and that's doubled from where we were in the 70s, so we're really seeing a rapid change in pace, and we're hoping to accelerate that progress with research and new treatments.
But we can help ourselves. OK, thanks very much, Fiona. Nice to talk to you this afternoon. The Kremlin says Britain is taking a hostile stance and making baseless hacking allegations against Russia. Moscow was responding to Defence Secretary Michael Fallon, who's accused of Russia of hacking UK infrastructure and weaponising information. It comes as a group of MPs warns the government isn't equipped to fight high-level cyber attacks threatening our national security. Police in North Wales think they found the remains of a woman in a reservoir 20 years after she was murdered. Sandy Bowen's husband was charged and convicted with her death after she went missing in 1997, but refused to say what he did with her body. And scientists have discovered people who can't tolerate loud eaters actually have a brain abnormality. Researchers at Newcastle University found people with a condition called misophonia have different mapping in the frontal lobe, which explains their intense emotional reactions to loud chewing noises. The boxer Chris Eubank became a household name in the 1990s, with millions tuning in to watch his fights. Now his son, Chris Eubank Jr., is trying to do the same as he attempts to reach the top of one of the hardest sports. Dan Rivers reports on a fight that's become a family affair.
Under the watchful eye of a former world champion, who just happens to also be his father, Chris Eubank Jr. is preparing for the biggest fight of his career. Tomorrow, he'll try and take the IBO super middleweight title from Australian Ranald Quinlan as he seeks to emulate his father's success.
This is his 25th fight. He's fighting for the World Championship. I fought for the World Championship in my 25th fight. Is this really happening?
Chris Eubank always discouraged his son from becoming a boxer, but it only served to strengthen Junior's determination to follow in Dad's footsteps.
I just want to try it. I just want to see what it's about. If my dad can do it, why can't I do it?
For him to tell me I couldn't do it, it didn't sit well with me. It wasn't. I had to experience it for myself. I had to see what boxing was about.
The IBO title is not considered one of the great boxing crowns, but both Eubanks consider this to be an opportunity to challenge for the other big prizes in boxing.
We haven't taken our eyes off of the target or our feet off of the pedal. We are still pushing. We still have to keep to the job. It's not fun and games.
This isn't, once I capture this world title, it's not like, oh, I've made it now. I've said it before, this is just the beginning.
His dad was said to have a granite chin. Now his son is out to prove if he's a chip off the old block, hewn from the same rock-solid training regime that will be tested tomorrow. Dan Rivers, ITV News.
And you can watch Chris Eubank Jr.'s world title attempt against Ranald Quinlan live from 7 o'clock tomorrow night on ITV Box Office. Finally, a North Yorkshire town that was torn apart by last winter's floods is finally being reunited this afternoon. An 18th century bridge that joined Tadcaster together collapsed as water flooded into the River Wharfe. Now, work to restore the crossing is finally complete, and our correspondent Damon Green is there. Damon, talk us through what's going to be happening this afternoon.
Well, the excitement is building. That's a hackneyed phrase, but certainly if you like high visibility clothing and the smell of tarmac, Tadcaster in North Yorkshire is the place to be. In just a few minutes' time, they're going to reopen this bridge that spans from the west side to the east side of the town across the River Wharfe for the first time in over a year. Now, it was on the 29th of December in 2015 that the bridge famously collapsed under the weight of floodwater pressing against it, and ever since then the town has been split in two, but today finally it will be reunited with itself. Now, David, you've been at the heart of the work here. How much work has gone into reopening this bridge?
An incredible amount, to be honest. The workforce particularly need to be paid a huge appreciation, because they've been working 24/7 for weeks and weeks now.
And how important is this bridge to the town?
It is significant. It severs the community, so there's almost half the community either side of the bridge. So the journey round is a significant number of miles, so it's been an awful pressure on them.
You were telling me that a lot of the school children live that side, but the schools are this side. So that's a lot of pressure for parents and families, isn't it?
They do. Again, I mean, you know, it disrupts everybody's day. I mean, it's hard work for kids anyway at school, isn't it? But then having to have an additional journey at the beginning and end of it, it's been a real problem for them.
OK, well, to get from one side of the bridge to the other without the bridge in place is a 16-mile detour, and in just a few minutes' time that detour will be insignificant once again. There will be a bus ceremonially crosses the bridge. There will be school children singing songs, and most importantly, this town, which was split in two, will be one town once more.
Damon Green, thank you. Lovely stuff. OK, and that's all from the lunchtime team. I'll be here with the ITV Evening News, though, back here at 6:30. Hope to see you then. The news where you are follows the national weather. But from everyone here, have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.